Hi everybody, I'm Dustin Benzel, and welcome to likely the final part of Generation 3 Reflections. This is part 3, let's get into it. Last time we discussed the league and how that turned out, and it was wasn't the best, but it was an okay league. So then we get into the Battle Frontier, but before we quite get into the Battle Frontier, there was one aspect that introduced the Battle Frontier to us audiences, and that was the episode where Scott was introduced as well as Agatha. Now, that's kind of a weird episode because it was kind of weird to see Pikachu using a normal type attack against Gengar just so Pikachu could lose, but, whatever. But what's interesting is that it was that particular episode that Scott introduced Ash into the Battle Frontier before he went to Pallet Town, I believe. I think it was the episode before he spent at Pallet Town. So yeah, there was that aspect, and blah 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 blah. No, just kidding. Yeah, because it was the Viridian Gym Viridian Gym, is that right? Yeah, the Viridian Gym, and that was like Giovanni's gym, and that's right next to Pallet Town. So let's get back into the Battle Frontier. So, but before we get in there, there's something that I want to address, and that was the introduction to the Battle Frontier, and it was the episode that introduced Scott. I'm just kidding. But anyway, it's when Ash was at Pallet Town, and he was talking about things, and it was Pallet Town, and that was when everything came together for the filler saga of the Battle Frontier. Now, there's something I want to address. Earlier, before the league, there was a Donphan episode, and it was about, I think it was Roll On Pokemon or something, and it was like a Love Donphan episode with a shiny Donphan. And now, this is interesting because during that episode, Ash actually mentions his Phanpy, which is kind of interesting because Ash usually doesn't name drop some of his Pokemon to his traveling companions or even just in general of the Pokemon he has at Professor Oak's or whatever. So it was really nice to see that Phanpy was name dropped, as a Pokemon that Ash had. So it's interesting to see that because fast forward to before the Battle Frontier, Ash drops Torkoal and Glalie. Now, I can understand why the writers did that, but it's not like Torkoal got anything, and Torkoal didn't even get anything during the Battle Frontier either, except one horrible battle that I didn't do well in. But, whatever, So, Glalie was fine, because Glalie did very well against the regular did very well within the league. So yeah, there was that, so it was really nice to see, I guess, technically Ash dumping 2 Pokemon and taking one of them so that Ash would have 5 Pokemon. Now, as we're going to find out, or we already know that from 4th generation, but as we're going to find out, that's a little it's a little awkward to see that happening. Ash should have had a full team, personally. And I feel like what should have happened is before Ash caught Apom is when one of those other Pokemon should have been deposited so Ash could catch Apom. Like some story plot, but we'll get to that later. But anyway, during the Battle Frontier, this is where we get some major changes, or for the most, I guess you could say, where we have what we have is we had Grovyle evolving into Sceptile. We had to deal with all that plot thing going on. Then we also had Phanpy evolving into Donphan, and then Ash capturing Apom. So, now, like I said, before I get into the Battle Frontier itself and the battles, I am a little disappointed that, I am a little disappointed that Ash actually caught Apom at the last moment, and he didn't have any other thing. I would have thought that maybe there should have been some more battle tournaments, and that way Ash could have brought back something. Of all the Pokemon that Ash used during the Battle Frontier, I don't think there was any Pokemon that could have been brought with him. along with Fampy, but, still would have been nice to see Ash with another Pokemon. A 6 Pokemon, because he had 5 Pokemon during the Battle Frontier for a long time. And that's calling back to first generation before the league where Ash would have no Pokemon. Or even during the Orange Island. Well, no, he did have Lapras and Snorlax, but still, though. You see what I'm saying, right? Ash should always have a full team. He shouldn't drop Pokemon just, for whatever. But whatever the case may be. But that's just me. So, let's talk about the 5 Frontier battles that I think occurred. There was Noland, Greta, I believe. Spencer, Annabelle, and Brandon. Now, the weird thing about this, and I do have to address this, is I've always wondered why Norman was the last gym leader. Not gym leader. I've always wondered why Brandon was the last Battle Frontier, the last Frontier brain, when in the games, Annabelle was that top Battle Frontier brain. But I guess that's how it happened. I guess they didn't want Annabelle being the last challenge for Ash, because they felt like the whole Reggie line would have been perfect for the Battle Frontier. But anyway, let's go into Nolan. Nolan was an interesting battle because it brought back Charizard and it was against Articuno, which was a really nice choice because Battle Frontier introduced at least quite a bit of legendary Pokemon battles, didn't it, with the Reggies and Articuno? So it was really nice. I didn't really have much of a problem with that battle. I mean, if I did, I'd say that it was on Articuno. I don't think Articuno probably should have been as strong as that, especially of like freezing Charizard's wings and stuff, or whatever the case was that hindered Charizard. So Charizard defeating Articuno may have not have. It should have looked better anyway. I mean, I didn't have any problem with it, but I'm sure some other people did. But again, that calls back to stamina and all sorts of stuff like that. And that just calls back to what I said about stamina, whatever. Let's just move on. The next battle, I believe, was Greta, and that was an interesting battle because not only did it bring back Snorlax, but Grovyle didn't do anything. And it's kind of amusing because, it's kind of funny to see Grovyle losing in that way. I think it was Medicham and Hariyama. I think it was. And I think it was, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Tyson's oh no, it was Metagross, never mind. I can't really remember, but the point is, Snorlax comes in there and just knocks out Hariyama and Medicham, and that's the end of that battle. That was a pretty interesting, they did have that wheel, but it's a little disappointing that I forgot about Tucker. There were 7. There were 7 Battle Frontier brains. 5 was Diamond and or Platinum with like Thornton and stuff. But then what was the other one? Nolan, Greta, Spencer, Annabelle, Tucker. It's only 6. Who was 7? Lucy. Oh, gee. See, I'm leaving that in just so you can see how long it took me to be a stupid moron. Anyway, so then I think, after Greta, I think it was Lucy. Now, as you remember, I said that I was going to address this. This was right after Fampy evolved into Donphan and Fampy was used. Now, the reason why I have a problem with this battle is because Pikachu got Milotic again. It wasn't so bad when Pikachu beat Juan's Milotic, but I have a serious problem with repeating battles where if Ash's Pokemon beating multiple Pokemon in a row, of the same species. Well, not in a row, but of the same species, you know? I mean, that goes back to how I didn't exactly like Palpitoad versus Zebstrika in the Unova League, because Ash's Palpitoad already took out Alessa's Zebstrika, so I didn't like that. And this is one of those cases where I didn't like it at all. And to have that actually also be the main battle, just like it was against Juan's Milotic, is why I have a problem with Lucy. So that's Lucy. So now we're going on to, I think, Tucker was the next one. Tucker was an okay one. Tucker probably is one that stands out the most outside of Brandon and Annabelle for various reasons. We'll get into it. But Tucker stand out just because he had a very flamboyant personality, and he was like a rock star, superstar, basically. You know, he had a Arcanine, he had Swampert, and it was against it was against Swallow and Corphish. Now that was an interesting battle. I will give a little leeway on some fans that might have disagreed with how this battle turned out, but at the same time, I would have to say, even though it was a little cheap, it was kind of cool to see, you know. I mean, the whole Swampert and Arcanine using that fire-water technique that they used was pretty cool, you know. Tucker was definitely a coordinator type person during that gym battle that inspired me for a later contest or whatever it was. So, yeah, there was that. Can't believe I forgot about that. Can't believe I forgot about Tucker and Lucy. Jeez. Anyway, so then after that, it was when Ash's Grovyle evolved into Sceptile, and it had that heartbreak, and it couldn't use its move, and that's when we got to Spencer. Now, Spencer's battle with Ash was okay because it was really cool to see Sceptile taking out Shiftry as well as Claydol, and Swellow taking out a Venusaur. The only problem that I really had with that battle is the fact that Heracross came back and it really didn't do anything, and that Heracross was treated more as a comic relief. You know, I do like how Heracross was used against the Sinnoh League and did do fairly well because it took out Kricketune, but Heracross and Muck and Kingler and Tauros are some of those Pokemon that have really relegated into really minor support roles within Ash's Pokemon team. And it's disappointing to see. So I didn't really like how Heracross just lost, you know. It would have been okay if it was like 4-on-4. And the other participant was Pikachu, and Pikachu lost without anything. And then Heracross beat Shiftry. And then, I don't know, something else, or Sceptile could have taken out Claydol and something else, and Swellow beating Venusaur is probably my favorite of the whole thing. Just that little tiny bird, just using Aerial Ace against that giant grass plant creature was pretty epic, and actually winning as a result was awesome. So then there was that. Then we moved into Annabelle, which is probably one of the more outstanding characters because she actually liked Ash. Out of a lot of the other characters, she actually had a crush on Ash, and we get a funny, amusing moments that Ash thought Annabelle was a male or a boy instead of a female. You know, so we got that amusing aspect of it, and so then. But before I get into there, I need to clarify with Lucy. In that battle, it was really nice. We have Lucy's Seviper versus Ash's Donphan. Ash's Donphan wins, of course. Then it was Pikachu, Milotic, blah, 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 blah. Okay, back to Annabelle. I realized that I forgot to mention that matchup but between Donphan and Seviper. But anyway, then we get into... So yeah, Annabelle was interesting because she was one of the characters that actually liked Ash. And, the battle was okay. There is one part of the battle that I do have to address. But before I get into that, it's really cool to see Tauros come back and participate in the battle, but the only problem that I had was that it just ended in a tie. I really don't like ties, even if it was with a Metagross. Now, there is something that fans call cheap within the actual battle, and I can understand, for the most part, why it would be a little hard to believe, but we're dealing with realistic mechanisms here, and the reason why this works is because it makes sense. Now, within the battle, Corphish gets confused. Ash recalls Corphish, and then instantly sends out Corphish again. Now, ordinarily, you wouldn't be able to do that, or you shouldn't do that, because that would be just cheap, because once you recall a Pokemon, it actually heals its confusion. Now, I can understand that from a realistic sense, that actually makes sense, but maybe there should have been some battle rules to prevent that, and maybe that's why we never saw that particular, again, when a Pokemon is confused or kind of stuck, unless they actually switch out with another Pokemon. But the thing is, I don't exactly agree that it was bad, simply for the fact that it actually makes sense, at least in like battles against Team Rocket, that if they confuse your Pokemon that can be recalled, to quickly recall that Pokemon and then send it out again. Because it's not, it makes sense within realistic sense when you think of the mechanisms of having a Pokemon out, grabbing a Pokeball, and recalling it to your Pokeball. There should be nothing to prevent you from just sending out that Pokemon again. There really shouldn't be. Now, maybe in terms of actual battles, I can understand there may be a rule that once you recall a Pokemon, you have to send out a different Pokemon, and that's perfectly fine. But that's about rules. But that doesn't make any. But that doesn't work in the mechanics of Pokemon in general. I mean, there was one person who did have problems with that, and I can understand that if this was a rule or a law within Pokemon battles, that it would be forbidden and why it shouldn't be allowed. However, at the same time, the mechanics should not prevent it from happening. Maybe against Annabelle was not exactly the best choice because it was kind of cheap, but, you know, I guess the writers and the animators or whatever kind of had a brain fart, I guess you could say, or a brain freeze at that moment where they didn't properly think about it. But like I said, it makes sense within the terms of the anime to do that, because there shouldn't be anything to prevent you from recalling a Pokemon and then sending it out back again. So that was Annabelle. One thing I have to notice is that Pikachu has been getting a lot of Battle Frontier wins at this point, which is why I don't really like it. Sure, it didn't get some, but it shouldn't have gotten the 3 that it did, especially since it beat Annabelle's Espeon. It shouldn't have gone to beat Brandon's Regice. But I can understand why it did, but I still think that against Annabelle, Ash should have used a different Pokemon. Which Pokemon? Well, definitely not Muck, because Muck is weak against Psychic types. But if we really think about this, versus Espeon, perhaps it should have been Donphan. Just because Donphan would have been used a little bit more. Or maybe even Torkoal to make up for the fact that Torkoal didn't give very much. Regardless of whatever you want to believe, I don't think it should have been Milotic and Espeon as well as Regice that Pikachu took down. But that's just me. So anyway, let's get into the last challenge of the Brandon, or the Brandon Frontier. Wait a minute. Who is this Pyramid Battle guy? No. So anyway, in the last Battle of Frontier, the last Frontier Brain was Brandon. And he was Ash's most difficult challenge. Now, I already addressed this, and I still am wondering why. Why is Brandon the last Battle Frontier? The only thing I could think of is it made sense in terms of the Reggies. However, Annabelle within the games actually did have legendary Pokemon. I think she had the 3 legendary beast Pokemon from Johto. I think she had like Entei, Raikou, and Suicune or something like that. I think. I'm not really sure, but I think she had something like that. Pretty sure she had or did she have Latios and Latios? Anyway, yeah, so I'm a little, I mean, I don't know why they gave her, or him, or, I don't know why they made Brandon the head frontier brain of the whole entire thing. May not have been the case, but that's what it seemed like. So anyway, moving on. The first battle was against Regirock as well as against Sceptile. Now, that battle would have been fine, but what I found cheap was that they had to add a possession type storyline. I mean, I'm not saying that Ash being possessed wasn't awesome or great. It was still pretty good. The problem that I had was that it ended up resulting in Ash losing or whatever, basically, and that they had to do with that storyline just so that Ash had to go through that stuff. I don't know. I mean, I can see Brandon's point that maybe Ash was a little bit too careless and he got possessed or whatever, but still kind of weird that actually happened. Otherwise, if it was any other battle, it would have been fine, and Sceptile didn't do too bad against Regirock. So then we run into the next battle, which was against Registeel, which is Torkoal versus Registeel. Now, the reason why I had a problem with this is because even though Torkoal did excellent against Registeel, still ended up losing, and that's kind of unfortunate because it's technically one of the better battles it has been in. Especially when you look at the Sinnoh League and we see Ash's Torkoal losing almost instantaneously to a Dark Pulse. Sure, whatever. Whatever the case may be. So then we get into a storyline where Ash is upset, especially since his Corphish lost to Chansey, or Nurse Joyce Chansey at that point. So then Ash decided that he was going to call back his original Pokemon that he had. Or at least, the first Pokemon that he had, first captures he had that he still had with him. So that, or at least that he could use, so that was Pikachu, his first ever Pokemon. And then we have the 3 starters of Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charizard. Then we get into a 4-on-4 battle. So, I didn't have any problem with Charizard losing to Dusclops. The problem that I had is that it lost using Seismic Toss. I really wish that Charizard didn't use Seismic Toss at that pivotal moment to beat, or have Ash use that. Have Ash. I would have preferred they did not have Ash tell Charizard to use that move in hopes that it would beat Dusclops, and in turn, Dusclops beats Charizard. I would have preferred Dusclops beating up Charizard just ordinarily. So then we get Bulbasaur versus Dusclops. Bulbasaur wins. Then Bulbasaur is recalled, and then it is Ninjask, I believe is the next one. It's Ninjask versus Squirtle. Squirtle manages to pull out a win. Good for Ash's Squirtle. Then Squirtle loses to Solrock, and then Bulbasaur manages to tie with Solrock. It was Solrock, I think. Yeah, I think it was a tie because I think it was just Pikachu and Regice. Now, a lot of people will call that battle cheap, but I do have to think that I think the battle was cheap on Brandon's side, not necessarily Ash's side, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So why didn't I find the battle against Regice cheap like some people did? Well, the problem is, even though Pikachu may not have deserved that win, Brandon was a little bit cheating in a way that Ash's Ash's Pikachu couldn't overcome. I was about to say Ash's Regice, but that would have been completely wrong. What happened was that I found a little ridiculous is that Brandon's Regice or whatever would use these, would stick, or not, how do I put this, would trap, there we go. Regice would trap Pikachu, and then Brandon would tell Regice to use Rest. And now if you know anything about Rest is a Pokemon move that will actually heal pretty much a Pokemon completely. It's like a max revive for the most part, with just a max heal, or no, not a max heal, but a full restore. So it's basically kind of like a full restore within the anime or within the games and stuff. It's kind of like a pretty much a full restore for the most part. Sure, it causes your Pokemon to sleep, but they can wake up and stuff, whatever. So the reason why I didn't find that cheap, the battle cheap with Pikachu using Volt Tackle to beat Regice, was for the simple fact that Regice kept using Ice Beam to trap Pikachu, just use Rest. I mean, I found that really cheap, especially since Pikachu used a double Iron Tail. You know, the whole thing was against Ash's Pikachu, that the only thing that could happen was that Ash decided to tell Pikachu to use Volt Tackle. The only Volt Tackle within that episode. So even if Regice was at full battle previously to that moment, Regice had not been hit by a Volt Tackle. And it may have been, like as I was talking about earlier, it may not have been expecting that, and that's probably why Regice was knocked out. Was because of that moment. That unexpected Volt Tackle. Because prior to this, it was Thunderbolt, Iron Tail, and Quick Attack. And, you know, I'm sure Regice was bracing itself for all those other attacks. But having Pikachu using a Volt Tackle at that moment could have been shocking, at least to Regice as well as Brandon, which is why Ash probably won that. Now, the reason why I'm calling a little bit foul here is that, at least with Brandon being the last challenge, is that Ash battled Brandon 3 times. That's very weird to see. He lost 2 times against one-on-ones, and then when it was a 4-on-4, Ash finally beat Brandon. That's the only thing that's weird. It's just that, what if Brandon kept beating Ash, you know? Would there have been ever resolution? And if there wasn't, what would be the point of having Ash lose to this guy over and over again? Now, I didn't address this in my 4th generation, at least in regards to Paul, because I kind of limited that conversation, but one of the things that happened with Paul in the Sinnoh region is that Reggie also did leagues and battled, and then he went to the Battle Frontier in Kanto, and he didn't actually do very well. So anyway, what happened in that is that Reggie, Paul's brother, did leagues and did battles and everything, and Reggie was a force to be reckoned with, but Reggie could never beat Brandon, and that's why Reggie decided to be a breeder, and that's why Paul was kind of an angry individual. So, that's pretty much it. Then we have the final contest of 3rd generation, as well as the exit of May and Max exit stage left. And it was Sceptile versus Blaziken. Then we get that, and then Ash brought Apom over to 4th generations, because it could be used to be trading with Dawn to get Weasel, blah, 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 blah. So that's 3rd generation. There we go. Woo! Alright, that covers that. We only have 2 generations left before I actually go back and switch gears back towards XY anime a little bit more in detail and just general discussions of Pokemon anime in general. If you have any thoughts of what I should do, then make sure to leave a comment or whatever, and of something of that nature. Sorry. So, again, as I said, 3rd generation wasn't too bad. It was fairly good in regards. Probably one of my favorites. As I said, I think maybe my technical 2nd favorite after 4th gen. We'll see what happens with 6th gen at the end. So, next generation we're going to talk about is, of course, 2nd generation. And that's probably going to be a short discussion. It's only going to be 1 episode long. It's going to be 40 minutes long, and that's going to all be, it's all going to be. Alright. Reminds me of that Markiplier video. Anyway, so that covers, this covers 3rd generation. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.